Today on The Future of Everything, the future of teaching computer science. Now, one of the hottest areas these days is computer scientists, coders, who can write software that works in almost all aspects of life: business, finance, healthcare, entertainment, defense, logistics, and many other areas. Computer science has become one of the most popular majors at many colleges, and the job market seems to have a nearly insatiable desire for students who understand computation and can make computers do things. Now, there's always been a little bit of a stereotype on computer coders: male, nerdy, into gaming and science fiction. And we see these images very often reinforced in television and movies and on the internet. Many people look at these stereotypes and may think, I'm not one of them, or I don't think I could do that or even be happy doing that. This is a problem, I would argue, because like many other areas, the strongest workforce is not going to be the homogeneous one where everybody is alike and comes from a similar background, but one where there's a broad set of backgrounds, so that you can create teams that do not fall into a monotonous groupthink, but instead can come up with unusual solutions to tough problems, bringing all of their experience from their previous life and their current life. So is there a special personality or set of skills required to learn computer science and how to code? Is this part of the job market therefore closed to some people, or is it more available than people might realize? Well, Cynthia Lee is a lecturer in computer science at Stanford University. She specializes in teaching computer science, has won awards for her teaching, and has written papers about teaching computer science. One of which, in fact, was named one of the top 10 all-time papers in computer science education. I hope we get to that. Cynthia, when you look out on your classrooms, are you seeing a good slice of folks from different backgrounds? And how much should an organization worry about diversity in their coding team?
Well, so I'm very fortunate that when I look out on my students, I do see a wide variety of people, and I think that's because we've taken very intentional steps at Stanford in our computer science department to make sure everyone knows that they are welcome and that they can succeed, and whatever their interests and aspirations are that may need a little coding to arrive and succeed at, that they all have what they need to succeed in our classes. So I think it's doable. It's just a matter of we've got to do it.
That's actually great to hear. So what are some of the changes or interventions that you made in order to ensure this kind of diverse student body? Is it hard work? Is it not that hard?
It's fun work. Hard work can be fun. If you don't think hard work can be fun, maybe actually coding is not for you. Yeah, it's part of it is just changing mindset. So actually another researcher on Stanford campus, Joe Bowler, has given us this idea of the growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And a growth mindset says that skills and talents that we have are developed over time. There's this idea out there, the 10,000 hours, which I understand is not an exact number, but that's part of a growth mindset, is understanding you just need practice and time on task, and any door can open. So part of Joe Bowler's research actually showed that whether the instructor has a fixed mindset or a growth mindset measurably impacts their students' success. So faculty who think, look, you're either born as a coder or you're not, that causes or is correlated with students in their class failing more often.
So that's fascinating. That's almost as if they're telegraphing that, or maybe even the way the course is set up is biased towards people who maybe fit this mold at what the instructor is expecting versus a more open-ended. I like the growth mindset model. So how did you get in, just to step back a little bit, how did you decide to devote yourself to computer science education? You had a PhD in high performance computing. Even then, I'm sure there were tons of opportunities. How did this become your passion?
Well, I confess to perhaps not the purest of motives, contributing in part to that, which is sometimes I think of my whole teaching career as a kind of revenge fantasy against how I was treated as an undergrad.
Right.
I was an undergrad in from 1997 to 2001. And that date matters because that was a previous big dot-com bubble, right? And so similar to now, where we've had these skyrocketing enrollments over the last 5 years or so in computer science, there was a pattern of these skyrocketing enrollments at that time as well. And so many computer science departments, including the one where I was, felt swamped by students. Academia cannot just quadruple a workforce overnight. Right. And so the teaching capacity is limited, and departments start to take measures essentially to weed out students and kind of on purpose scare them away.
Huh.
And that made for an environment that I ultimately did well in on paper, but found to be very off-putting. Mm-hmm. And it just nobody wants to work, whether you're a student or just any employee anywhere. You don't want to work somewhere where you feel that your boss wishes you would go away. Right.
So the decision to do the teaching is in a sense to make sure that other people don't experience that kind of environment.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So what is drawing students? I stated it as if it was just a fact that computer science is a popular major, and but what is it that's drawing students to computer science these days? There must be a lot attractive about it across a broad diversity of students. And what is it? How would you describe what is the draw or the lure of computer science for students trying to make decisions about their major these days?
It's a lot of things. A sense of economic uncertainty, deep uncertainty about the future, kind of stagnating entry-level minimum wage kind of situation, growing wealth concentration. I think there's sort of very large global societal forces that are leading to a zeitgeist of uncertainty, and that computer science is seen as maybe a safe hedge against future job market disruptions, especially because many of those job market disruptions will probably come from computer science in the form of AI technology. So I think that's part of it, is just a very practical motivation. But I also think there's a lot of fascination with the ways that technology is transforming our world, and the sense that this is kind of where it's happening, and this is the place to be right now at this moment in history.
So how would you characterize the core things that somebody learns as in a computer science course? Let's say either as a major or in the introductory series of classes. What is it that they're learning? And I know this is partially an unfair question, but welcome to the future of everything. What is the special talent that we're instilling in these students as they go forward? If I'm somebody who's thinking about somebody who's been trained in computer science, what can I kind of count on them knowing how to do?
Well, I like to think of the intro part of computer science as a foreign language class. And there's a lot that goes into that. So, you're learning a programming language. So in that sense, the comparison feels very literal. Yes, you will be fluent in C++ at the end, or Java or Python at the end of this class. But it's even a little more than that. Did you study a language in high school or college?
Yes, Latin and Greek. Super useful. The deader the language, the better.
Well, so I studied French. And in addition to learning how to conjugate verbs 50 different ways, you'd have the day where your teacher tells you about the Eiffel Tower and baguettes, and there's a culture that goes along with it. And you learn not only how to say things in a literal way, but how kind of conventions, or yes, okay, technically this would translate to that, but nobody would actually say it that way. And so all of that is very true in learning how to program as well. And it's an interesting kind of foreign language because you are addressing two very different audiences at the same time. You have to learn to speak to the computer, and the computer is so exacting. Any beginning programmer will remember just one little character off and the whole thing blows up. And
I gotta say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
one of my all-nighters as an undergraduate was not recognizing that on the old terminals, an L and a 1 looked identical.
Oh no.
And therefore I just stared at this code all night, wondering why it wasn't working. And it was because I had an L instead of a 1, or a 1 instead of an L. And so what you just said really hits home about one character causing me a night of sleep. And then I just rewrote it. And when I rewrote it, of course, I didn't make the typo, or I didn't use the 1 or the L, and it worked. So anyway, please continue.
So that's one audience, is learning to speak to the computer. And in addition to this kind of character level detail, there's also the way it takes everything you say so literally. Like, I don't know if you read the Amelia Bedelia books.
Yes.
Yeah.
I dreaded them.
There's this children's book, right, where there's this housekeeper and the family hires, and she just takes things very literally. So they give her like a to-do list, and then they leave for the day, and they come back, and she's one of the to-do lists was draw the curtains in the living room. So she, of course, doesn't pull them back, which is what that was supposed to mean, but she gets out a sketch pad, and draws a picture of them. So and that's the computer, right? Yeah. So learning how to really put yourself in the computer's shoes, which a lot of people don't associate the quality of empathy with computer scientists. But who has, greater need to exercise empathy and put yourself in someone else's shoes than someone who has to put themselves in the shoes of a sort of being that just thinks in a completely different way from the way most people think. So there's that. But an equally important audience for everything we write in computer science is other programmers. So that's where all this culture comes in of, there's a way to get it done. So, okay, you pass the test, but that won't get you very far in a career in computer science. Right. You need to write things with good style in ways that other programmers can easily understand what the purpose was when they read it. And I find that part fascinating. Like, sometimes I'll be reading some Java code, and it's perfectly well written. It works. There's nothing really wrong with it, but I can tell it's like Java spoken with a C accent. Oh, like this is someone whose first language was C, and now they're writing Java.
That's fun. So there's dialects.
Yes. So I don't know.
Yeah. So that's actually very helpful, because there is. So who would ever think that empathy would be one of the first things you would mention as an outcome of computer coding training? But the way you just described it, it makes perfect sense. I also wanted to ask you about, for all these folks, I guess that a student, especially in an introductory programming class, there's two ways they could go. They could say, I want to learn another field. I want to have a major like English or history or biology, but I want to know how to use a computer because I think that's important to the future of that field, versus I want to be a computer science major and that is my field. And I was wondering if you see that being played out, and do students struggle with, should computer science or computer programming be something I know as part of becoming something else, or is it going to be where I live as my major? And do you approach those students differently, or do they really get the same initial introduction to the field?
It's a great question. And here we, at Stanford, we have one intro course, well, really two, and they are the same for, when I say two, it's a 2-course sequence. So, and they are both courses in the sequence intended to be for anyone who wants to program, whether they will end up one of our own in computer science, or whether they will take that and use it to enhance whatever else they're working on. Not every school does it that way, and I think there are, good reasons to go either way. There are certainly some topics that we cover in our 2-course sequence that maybe make the most sense if you're going to continue as a computer science major, but I think for me, the cultural reasons outweigh. And by that, I mean, not wanting to create silos where people have to decide earlier than they really have all the information to make a decision whether they think they're going to be a computer science major or not. I think that's one reason we've been so successful at attracting a wide variety of students, is that the door of that first course is open, and the number of students who didn't know they wanted to be a CS major until they take that intro course is a huge number. But yeah.
So yeah, this is great. That's very helpful. And then in the final minute that we have before the break, I wanted to ask, do you have to be good at math? So so if somebody is taking an inventory of, like, maybe I should learn, I actually have I have a son who was a history major, and I said to him when he was in college, please take a computer science course. And he said, no, I refuse to take a programming course. I hope he forgives me for telling the story. And I said, but what happens if you're an incredibly talented programmer or computer scientist? And he said, Dad, if I'm a talented computer scientist, I don't want to know. And that hurt my heart. But my question is there basic aptitude, or is it really much broader than people might think? Or do they really need to kind of be great at math? Or is there other, like, entry criteria that people should know about?
So there probably are entry criteria. I would say math is not one of them. You don't need to be a math person. A great thing about computer science is that it is such a broad field that touches on so many areas. So, if you do love math, then getting into a lot of the linear algebra computation that underlies things like advanced computer graphics that's used in film, or AI, both of those fields are essentially applied large-scale linear algebra. And if you're not into math, then you can do things like interaction design. Design the part of a program that is what the user sees, and we call front-end development. So if you are interested in music, then you can look at the intersection of computer science and music. So it's really something, bring what you have, bring what you're good at, and we'll figure out how to amplify that using the power of the computer.
This is The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. More with Cynthia Lee on computer science education and what's it all about, next on SiriusXM. Welcome back to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. I'm speaking with Cynthia Lee about computer science education. In my introduction, I mentioned that you had one of the 10 best papers of all time in computer science education, and I think I owe it to everybody to find out what was that paper about and why did it strike such a chord for the field.
So that paper was about studying a different style of lecture than is traditional for university classrooms. And we had a team of us at UC San Diego at the time who started using it there. And then we got colleagues at several other universities. And then after a number of years, had really enough data to say, how does this work in many different contexts? And our finding was that it works really well. And so, if you think about probably most of the college lectures that you attended, is what we call the sage on the stage. There's this person who's paid to be really smart, standing in the front of the room, holding forth on the topic of the day, and students are furiously taking notes about it, and that's kind of what learning looks like. But if I think back on my undergraduate years, and I think this is true for a lot of people, where did your brain really grow and transform? And that was probably not in that lecture setting. It was probably you were hunkered down with your favorite study group and trying to prep for some exam and really working through problems, giving things a try, actively practicing what you're doing. And so the idea of peer instruction was actually started in physics education by a Harvard physics professor, Eric Mazur, who had some similar observations in his class and said, let's put that in lecture. So more of a Socratic model. What's different about peer instruction, as Eric Mazur formulated it, is that it scales well to large classes, which is of course very important in computer science, where we have very large classes. If you have a traditional Socratic model where, I don't know, that you see more in like a law school or business school, where you kind of cold call people in the audience and have these one-on-one interactions, it's hard for that to scale to 530 students, which is what I have right now.
So let me make sure I understand. I love the sage on the stage. Are we saying that we supplement with peers like in small groups, because that would be like a section of a larger class? Or are we saying that the sage is said, we say goodbye to the sage on the stage, and that the primary way of transporting the material to the students is via their peers? So can you just, how far into this do we want to go?
Well, I hope we don't do away with the person on the stage entirely, because I do like my job. But
yeah, some of us depend on a little bit of that.
So it's just the idea of breaking lecture down into miniature segments. So maybe I do the sage on the stage thing for say 8 minutes, and then I just stop talking. And that is the first magical step of being a good teacher, is realizing when you just need to stop talking and let the students give it a try. So we have structured exercises. We'll say, okay, for the next 2 minutes, discuss in groups of 3 or however many people are clustered near you. And here's a question I want you to think about. And now,
do they come back and you get them to tell you what they discussed, or do you just trust that they had a good discussion and then move on?
So of course, being the nerds that we are, we have to introduce some technology into this. So we have them answer via an app that, and so I can see summaries of the whole class's responses and see how they're grappling with the question. It could be a multiple choice question, which sounds very constraining, but it's amazing how much robust discussion you can get out of even just a true false question if there's some real nuance built into it.
Right.
My favorite kind of question, so a lot of faculty do this as a sort of quiz on, did you get what I just talked about in the last 5 to 8 minutes? My favorite kind of question is actually not that. My favorite kind of question is to ask them something about what I'm going to talk about next.
Oh,
Because, learning is hard. And I think sometimes the brain kind of resists it. And, but there's nothing like the frustration of realizing there's something you don't know or can't do that really plows the field, I think, to
yeah.
get people anxious to hear. And so I'll ask a question that appears to be something that, like what they've seen before, that they have two tools to solve, and they'll kind of just hop right into it, and then hit this moment of, wait a minute, the tools that I have don't quite, well, shoot, now what do I do?
Right.
And then that's where I can step in and say, well, I'm glad you asked, because for the next 5 to 8 minutes, we're going to talk about that.
No, that does sound, yes. I totally understand what you're saying about a little bit of conscious misunderstanding or lack of understanding is really a beautiful way to get people. First of all, they'll be attentive, right? Because there's this issue of holding their attention, and nobody likes not knowing what's coming next. And to get them to be explicit about that really does make sense. Well, so we only have a couple of minutes, and you teach one course that's not about computer programming directly, and it's called Race and Gender in Silicon Valley. And what a loaded title, because as you know, Silicon Valley right now not always has the most positive reputation around the country and around the world. What's that course all about, and what do you teach the students?
Well, I started the course because I was getting so many students coming up to me after class and office hours, wanting to have conversations about what is all this that I'm reading in the news about tech. And I'm loving this computer science major, but oh my goodness, am I just walking into a swamp? Like,
Yes.
Talk to me about what is going on. And so I thought, we need an official forum to really unpack all this. So the course looks at, how did we get where we are? So if you look at a graph from, say, like 1970 to today, I think NPR or PBS had an article that had a graph like this attached for other high skill professions, like law, medicine, and computer science. And you see that, second wave feminism was effective in getting women into those high trained, high salaried professions. And there's a steady growth until they reach about 50-50 parity. And computer science tracks that until about 1985. And then we start going backwards down to women being about 15% of the workforce, where we are now. And so we look at, what happened, how did we get where we are, what was going on there, and then we look at what that means for the product. So you said in your intro about the responsibility we have in tech to have diverse teams and have the robust, broadly beneficial products that those diverse teams can make. And I think that is so true. I think that's why tech workers were famously treated well, right? Unlimited free food on campus of these tech companies and stuff. We get paid well. So not to minimize how damaging it can be in that situation and face discrimination and harassment, but I wouldn't be so passionate about this, and I wouldn't say this, really should be the focus of everyone's attention if it were just that. It's really because, like Hollywood, the workers in our field tell stories that are consumed by everyone. So it's really that everyone that I'm worried about more than just those of us who work in tech. And if we're shaping the future, we have to have every voice at the table. And that's really what the course is goal is.
Well, thank you. And thank you for listening to The Future of Everything. I'm Russ Altman. If you missed any of this episode, listen anytime on demand with the SiriusXM app.